Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big topics through the art of the slideshow. Today, we are diving into a true giant of modern art, Pablo Picasso. So how does an artist become a legend? For a lot of them, it's about a lifetime spent perfecting one single signature style. But for Pablo Picasso? No way! His path was all about constant, chaotic, and brilliant reinvention. He didn't just tweak his style, he completely blew up the definition of art over and over again. He really summed it up perfectly himself with this quote. It captures his entire life's mission: to get away from technical perfection and get back to something more raw, more primal, more honest. And today, that's the exact journey we're going to trace through 5 masterpieces that really mark the huge shifts in his life and his art. What's so wild about Picasso's story is that it doesn't start with him being a rebel. It starts with an almost scary level of classical, technical genius. I mean, really let that sink in. At just 14 years old, most artists spend decades, maybe their whole lives, just trying to master the rules of realistic painting. Picasso had it down cold before he was even a teenager. It's kind of like a musician mastering every single classical concerto before deciding, you know what, I'm going to go invent jazz. And you can see that skill clear as day in his early works, like this famous portrait of the writer Gertrude Stein. Just look at the weight of it, the form, the absolute confidence in every brushstroke. He could have had a celebrated career just painting like this. But, and this is the key to Picasso, this mastery wasn't the finish line for him. It was just the starting block. So what on earth pushed him to take the leap? Well, his first true reinvention, the style that would really make him a star, wasn't born from some big artistic idea. It was born from a completely devastating personal tragedy. So when Picasso first got to Paris, he and another young Spanish painter, Carlos Casagemas, were basically joined at the hip. They were ambitious, they were inseparable, and they were all set to conquer the art world together. And then, the unthinkable happened. The sudden, violent death of his best friend just completely shattered Picasso. He was plunged into this deep, dark place of grief and guilt and overwhelming sorrow. He poured all of that pain directly onto his canvases, and that's what gave birth to his famous blue period. He basically stripped his paintings of all warmth, choosing to paint the outcasts and the poor in these haunting shades of blue and green. For the first time, color wasn't just descriptive, it was pure, raw emotion. And believe me, that was a radical idea at the time. Okay. So he's mastered realism. He's learned how to paint with pure emotion. What's next? Well, for Picasso, his ambition just kept getting bigger. He didn't just want to create a new style. He wanted to invent a whole new way of seeing. So he teams up with his friend Georges Braque, and together, they basically took a sledgehammer to centuries of artistic tradition. They invented a totally new language called Cubism, where they would literally shatter objects and figures, and then reassemble them from multiple viewpoints all at once. The real breakthrough moment for Cubism was this painting right here, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. It was so jarring with its sharp angles and fractured bodies that it shocked even his most avant-garde friends. He was showing figures from multiple viewpoints at the exact same time, completely destroying the old rules of perspective. With this single canvas, Picasso didn't just change his art, he redrew the map for all of modern art to come. So now Picasso has this radical new artistic language. And decades later, a brutal act of war would push him to use it not for an artistic revolution, but as a powerful political weapon. It's 1937, the Spanish Civil War is raging, and Nazi bombers completely annihilate the Basque town of Guernica. Picasso, who was living in Paris at the time, is just consumed with rage at this senseless slaughter of civilians, and he responded the only way he knew how, with furious speed, channeling all of that outrage directly into his work. The result was Guernica, and it's not a literal picture of the bombing, it's a universal scream of agony. He used that fragmented, chaotic language of Cubism to capture the terror and suffering of war in a way that feels both immediate and totally timeless. The writer André Breton captured its power perfectly when he asked if a painting could hold its own next to the daily paper. And Guernica was the answer. It had the same urgency and shock as a front-page headline screaming about an atrocity. And because of that, it went way beyond the art world. It became one of history's most powerful and enduring anti-war statements, cementing Picasso's status not just as a great artist, but as the artistic conscience of his generation. Now let's jump to the final years of his life. Picasso is well into his 80s and 90s, and his art takes one last wild turn as he confronts the one subject that he couldn't conquer, his own mortality. He started working with this desperate, furious energy, just churning out a torrent of paintings. They were raw, crude, sometimes even cartoonish, and full of this primal, carnal energy. He went back to his old themes, the artist, the model, the musketeer, but with this new, almost frantic abandon. And at the time, the art world was just baffled. A lot of critics dismissed the works. One famously called them incoherent doodles done by a frenetic dotard in the anteroom of death. Ouch. They saw it as a sad decline, that the genius had finally lost his way. But they were missing the point entirely. See, today, this late period is seen as maybe his most courageous. This wasn't a decline. It was a final defiant roar. He had spent a lifetime trying to learn how to paint like a child. And here, right in the face of death, he was finally doing it, using his art to just rage against the dying of the light. And in his final years, he drew a series of self-portraits that really prove this point. But they aren't really portraits, they're more like death masks. He's staring directly at his own mortality, unflinching, transforming his own face into a skull. It is an absolutely haunting farewell from an artist who never, ever stopped looking. So Picasso's journey leaves us with way more questions than answers. Was he a genius, a chauvinist, a child? The truth is, he was all of it. He was a technical master who chased the freedom of a kid, a revolutionary who was constantly looking to the past. And to really understand Picasso isn't about finding one simple answer. It's about embracing all of those contradictions. He shows us that a true legend is never simple, and their art is a battleground where genius, ego, and humanity all collide.